Hi, my name is Todd Leonard.
And my name is Herb Montgomery, and we're just talking.
I got a bone to pick with y'all. Um, this past week, we only got one thumbs up on our broadcast. And if you didn't like last week's episode, that's fine. We have no problem with that. And please ridicule us in the comments all you want. But we need those thumbs up just for it's for us. Just remember, this is
For
all
the
for us. It's not
algorithm.
it's not for you. It's for us. So can you give us some more thumbs up just for us? We won't take it to mean you actually liked the episode. It's just to help us out. So if you could do that, that would be great. As also, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button. And if you would like to be notified of when a new episode shows up, which is usually on Thursdays sometime, you can click the bell icon. Uh, I just like to joke and play around. But anyway, thanks for all y'all do. And we always appreciate having you with us.
Thanks, Todd. For those who are new to this channel, each week, Todd and I take a moment to have a conversation about the upcoming weekend's lectionary reading from the Gospels. And our goal is to talk about those passages in the context of love and inclusion and social justice. And our hope is that our talking will be just talking, as in justice, but that also something we might say as we go back and forth would inspire you along with us to do more than just talking. So, Todd, what passage are we looking at this week?
And for justice sake, please click the like button. Uh, that would be a form of justice because our likes are so low and our viewership is so low. That would be a form of just this the easiest. Oh, I froze up for a second. I'm sorry. That would be an easy
I
form of
still heard
justice.
you.
Oh, you heard me. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, your sound continued on.
all right. I'm sorry. The question you asked, Herb, was what passage are we doing? And I didn't choose to answer that immediately. Now I'll tell you that it's Mark chapter 10, verses 17 through 31, typically known as the parable of the rich young ruler or the rich man, or in my current scripture that I'm looking at, it says it's Jesus teaching on wealth and reward.
All right. All right. All right. So, um, yeah, when I look at this passage, all I hear immediately are all of the objections I've heard over the years to not taking this passage literally. Like we want to take everything else in the Bible literal, right? Until we
Right.
get to something like this. And
Right.
then we got to start backpedaling. So there's the rich young ruler where Jesus says, one thing you lack, go liquidate all your wealth and give it to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. And then there's the statement of, easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. And there's so much there to qualify and talk about.
Hmm.
Um, but then, with man, this is impossible, but not with God. All things are possible with God. And then there's this, if you believe Jesus, you'll get all this stuff in return, plus persecutions.
It's going to be really great.
Yeah, it's a good
And
week.
there's
It's a good week.
and
Actually, I like
persecutions.
I like all of these. I mean, if when they're interpreted in life-giving ways, I actually appreciate a lot of what we're going to talk about this week. So, what are your thoughts, Todd? Where do you want to jump? Where do you want to start?
Oh no, let's work through the way you worked through it in your blog.
Okay.
Let's just
Okay.
go.
So, a lot of people say that this is just for him, and I just want to say from the very beginning, it may have been this dialogue between this specific gentleman and Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, but it wasn't viewed that way as an isolated event in the Jesus movement history. Because by the time we get to Luke, I think it's Luke chapter 12. Jesus isn't telling an isolated person to go sell everything they have and give it to the poor. He's telling the entire audience in one of
Mm,
his preaching sessions, his teaching
mhm.
sessions. He's telling the community. And what we see from the book of Acts, which is, often grouped with the book of Luke, is that once the early church started growing, this was actually the first thing they did once they became baptized is those who had more than what they needed would liquidate that superfluous asset, and they would give it to the disciples, and it would be shared and distributed among the community for anyone who had need. And so they eliminated um
They're
any
surplus.
need, yeah, any need among them. Like they eliminated poverty among the early church in the book of Acts in the
Yeah,
story
yeah.
by doing this. So, yes, in Mark, this is an isolated individual exchange. But if you look at it over the expanse of early Christian history, it doesn't stay that way. It becomes a community teaching that they saw to be universal for everyone who could do this.
And again, when you look at this is these gospels that are written, they're written by communities for community teaching. This is not some private journal that we just happened to unearth and it got stuck in the Bible. This was communal writing that became known as the Gospel of Mark. And so this passage is put in there because it was believed to be teaching relevant to the community as a whole.
That's
So
right.
this is this that nothing that you would read in any of the four gospels, even John, which Herb and I, as you know, are not big fans of. They're all written there for communal purposes, not not just single stories that was nice for that one person or important for that just one person.
So, my position hasn't changed on the Gospel of John by any means yet. But I want to say I'm reading a book right now by Richard Horsley on the politics of the Gospels and the politics of Jesus. And when he gets to John, he acknowledges all of our problems that we have with John.
Hmm.
But I'm going to have to send this to you, Todd, because he has a different spin on what was happening with John. And it doesn't solve the problems,
Hmm.
but it cast it in a little different light that I had never considered before. And I can't think of like I'm gonna have to go back and get it and send it to you because I can't
I
do it
don't want
justice
to. I
tonight
don't
off
want
the
to
top of my
learn
head.
more. I want to continue to hold current my current beliefs. I don't
Always
want to.
learning, Todd.
Don't make me learn more. Don't make me
Don't.
change again. So
All right.
anyway,
I don't think you'll become a fan of John still, but it does
oh,
paint
all
it in
right,
a little
okay,
better light.
all right.
But anyway, so that's kind of a tangent. Yeah, this next thing, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. It's impossible for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. I want to make clear here that what we're talking about in this passage, and it's assumed Jesus is saying it's hard for rich people to go to heaven.
Right,
And nowhere in this passage is Jesus even talking about how to get to heaven. Matter of fact, nowhere in the Gospel of Mark or
right.
Matthew or Luke does Jesus ever tell people how to get to heaven.
That's right.
It's all about bringing the kingdom of heaven to
To earth.
here on earth. How do we
Right.
bring that kingdom here and now? What kind of community, what kind of human community would that look like? What does the reign of God look like here on earth? Um, Specifically in the context of justice. But what he's saying is, as they're creating this kingdom, or rather, that's language of back then, and it's patriarchal. I totally agree. But as we're talking about that community, maybe kingdom or
Hmm.
kinship or
Hmm.
family or siblinghood or whatever you want to call it. And Martin Luther King used to call it the beloved community.
Hmm.
Whatever we're referring to when we use this language, it's difficult for someone who has spent their life amassing wealth, is what it's saying. It's difficult for them to enter into a community where wealth is no longer possible. If you have wealth, that has to be shared with those who
Yeah.
don't have. That's the impossibility. And when you look at it in those terms, boy, it sure is hard. It
Yep.
sure is impossible.
Yeah.
Sure enough.
Yep. And let's be honest, the early followers of Jesus were by and large not people with wealth.
That's right.
They
That's right.
were, so the rare ones who were, like you said, when we get to Acts, we find out that those rare ones were the ones who,
The few.
huge props to them. I mean, wow, radical conversion. We'll use conversion.
Mm.
They're converting to not just believing in Jesus. They're converting to a whole new economic system. They're converting to a whole new view of how to love people, which includes loving people with your surplus. That's huge. Uh,
Yeah.
so
I mean,
it's
in this passage, it says you can't serve both God and money. Can't serve
right.
two masters. You'll love one, hate the other, or love one and despise the other. And the reality is, those people you're referring to, they realized that they could either serve God or continue pursuing wealth, pursuing money. And what they realized was to love God or to pursue God or pursue the kingdom of God or the reign of God meant to value people and community above their hoarded wealth.
Yes.
And so that, that it was, you can't serve people and wealth is, you could say it that way.
And let's be clear, we're not talking about people giving their money to what we would have today as a church institution, where they're giving their money to a church
Correct.
institution, where then in some situations the pastors are buying bigger homes or planes and things like that.
Correct.
It's not where the church itself is getting wealthy. It is they were, it was like a, maybe to try to equate it to something like a co-op, a cooperative, neighborhood cooperative, in a sense, it's very much of a some kind of organizational structure where the goods are shared amongst one another, rather than it flowing upwards to a top few or something. It was very much, at least for a while in the beginning, a very equitable distribution, for the sake, because the purpose of the church was eliminating imbalances and inequities across the board, including economically.
Yeah, I like the way you said that, including economically, but it was across the board. It was inequities in general. And two, we have to remember that when these gospels were written, the Jesus movement was still largely a Jewish sect.
Mm-hmm.
And, there were no church buildings that had to be
Right.
paid for. There was no pastoral staff, where
No.
there were pastoral salaries. When they took up these collections, it went to eliminating poverty. It was the what is it called? What do the early church fathers call it? Something of the poor. Oh, I forget. I'll remember by the time we stop tonight.
Hmm.
I'll be laying in bed tonight and it'll come to me. But yeah. Anyway, it was money that was earmarked for the
Yeah.
poor.
Yeah.
Hey, what about this camel?
The camel.
Have you heard that there was a gate in Jerusalem and
Yes.
for to get through it, the camel had to get down on its knees and
Yes.
crawl through. Have you
So it
heard
was it
that?
was possible. So the camel could get through. Yes. It
Well,
just took
archaeology
for
tells us now that that was all made up by an early church father. That's never not even historically accurate. There's no gate. There's
the
no
eye of the
eye of the
needle.
needle. Camels didn't get down on their knees and go through it. None of that's true. Jesus is being
I've heard of a
hyperbolically
camel that
funny.
would go through the office on Wednesday and say it's hump day.
Yes. Yes. No, that's
That's a
different.
that's a Geico commercial. So
Exactly.
so
Hump
anyway,
day. No, really.
hump day. Sorry, go ahead.
And something else that's true is the Greek word for, or the Aramaic word for camel and the Aramaic word for rope are different by one syllable, one vowel. So some scholars say that this is even a scribal area when error when they were copying it down. That as impossible it is for a rope to go through the eye of the needle, the big fat rope has to be pared down to where it's just a string. Then it can go through the eye of the needle. That actually makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
I like that because the way that the kingdom changes the life of the rich is that they're no longer rich.
Right. You have to
They're
be
this big thick
slimmed down.
rope. They're yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All of that excess is shared with
Stripped
the
away. Yeah.
community.
Ah.
Interesting.
Huh.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt when I heard that. I was like, huh,
Yeah.
it tracks. It tracks.
Could work with that.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's like it's a good thing that the Bible isn't inerrant. It could be a good thing that the Bible isn't inerrant
that's true.
because that might actually, if you could just possibly allow for a little wiggle room, there might be, yeah, take off a syllable and all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense.
Yep, yep, yep. But even if it is a camel versus a rope, then scholars just say Jesus was being using hyperbole and
Hyperbole,
exaggeration and being
yes,
funny and
which he's
comedic.
done in other places.
Right. That wouldn't be out of that would not be uncharacteristic in the story.
Correct. And it's certainly not uncharacteristic to say that it's hard for people who have power and privilege to voluntarily
Oh
give
my
that up
goodness.
for the
Yes.
sake of creating a more equitable society. Um,
Very rarely have the privileged, propertied, and powerful voluntarily given up those things, those
right,
advantages for a more equitable society.
right,
Very rarely. It usually is removed from them by
right.
force. Jesus was inviting them to volunteer.
Yeah,
It's easier if you do it by choice.
it is. And it's much more meaningful and joyful if you can come around to seeing it that way and making that choice to volunteer. It becomes a spring of. Am I? Are you still hearing me? My
I can hear
picture,
you fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can hear you.
my picture
Your
froze for a second.
image freezes sometimes, but I can still hear you.
Yeah. So it. Well, I lost my train of thought because
It's more holistic, it's more healthy, it's more beneficial to the individual to do it voluntarily, I think is what you were saying.
yes, it's the healing that would take place for the person in a position of wealth and privilege and power, uh, as well as healing for the person in poverty and without power. It's healing both ways, as opposed to setting up a governance system where a person in power with wealth is forced to release that, which could lead to bitterness and grievance, um, and and that type of thing. So yeah, Jesus is asking for changes of heart at the end of the day, but
His goal is not the change of heart, his goal is equity,
his
right?
goal is equity, and
But he
he is
hopes
trying
that it
to
will come
change
through a
the
change of
heart
heart.
to get to cause the equity to happen. The end is
Right.
not changing the heart, but that's how this passage has been taught. Is no, Jesus is saying no. He's wanting him to have a heart of love, a heart of sacrifice. No, 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 no. He's wanting his heart to change so that he will actually give up the money, that he
That's right.
will actually try to help people who are in poverty. So no,
Gives you a
the
chance to
end is
voluntarily.
still equity.
Yeah. Gives you a chance to voluntarily do it. But at the end of the gospels, the first become the last and the last become the first. That's where we're headed.
Right.
You can do it early and voluntarily if you'd like, and it would be way more beneficial. That's kind of the story.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't
Yeah.
go in there to the temple and just try to change their hearts. He flipped the tables of the money changers and was like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And he tried for however many, depending on what gospel you read. Some people say he had 1 year ministry. Some people say he had a 3 year ministry. Regardless of how long his ministry was, he spent all that time leading up to that before that could have been voluntary.
Yeah.
So anyway, what about this? And again, I grew up. For those of you who don't know this, I grew up at PTL with Jim and Tammy Baker, and
Praise
I
the
wish I had
Lord.
yeah, I wish I had a nickel for every time I'd heard this next section of our reading this week, where it says, "No one has left homes or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or fields for me and the gospel, and will fail to receive 100 times as much in
Yes.
this present age. Send me your
Yes.
money
Right now
and
on your
God, like
screen, this is, you'll see.
800 number, call in."
Yes. Yes.
It was the 80s, so there was no .com. It was the 800 number on
It
the
was the
screen to
800
call in.
number or the PO box
Or the PO box. That's right. That's right.
in some major city
And
or
yeah,
in
you'll get a
Canada.
hundred times as much. Whatever you give, you'll give 100 times back. That's what it says. That's what it
Yep.
says. And Jesus goes on to say, homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, fields, dash, along with persecutions. Well, I mean, that's so. Where is that coming out of? That's like left field, man. What is that about? Do you have any thoughts on this?
It's a little passive aggressive, honestly.
It
It's
You'll get 100 times back and a lot of trouble. I don't hear the prosperity gospel preachers preaching that part of the passage.
it's like saying you're going to have a condo on the beach in Florida, and then there's going to be hurricanes. It's like saying the
Exactly.
exact same.
Exactly.
Oh man.
So what is he saying here? I mean, I have an idea. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
I thought you had really frozen this time, but you were
oh,
just still
no,
for a
no.
long
This time it's actually Todd who is buffering, not my video that's buffering. I am buffering because I don't have. It's I think it reflects the communal
Yes.
conflict over they believe that this is going to lead to something better, and yet as they're writing this, in the midst of writing this, they're writing it at a time of when things are not looking that great, and there is real difficulty and persecution going on.
So if you have a community, and this is the only way that I can make sense out of it, it's very similar to what you just said. Um, and I could be wrong, and I am totally open to larger interpretations of this. But if we take everything we've set up to this point, the kind of communities they were creating is communities where people who had a lot liquidated that a lot
Mm-hmm.
in order to make sure that people in the community were taken care of. So what
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is saying is if you lose, let's say your be careful. Okay, a home.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the very first one. You lose a home for choosing to be part of the Jesus movement or be a Jesus follower. Well, you're stepping into a community where there are multiple homes in this
Mm-hmm.
community that are now also yours because you're part of the community to whom
Yeah.
those homes belong. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're getting 100-fold back,
Mm-hmm.
right? In a communal setting rather
Yes.
than an individualistic setting. He's not saying if you individually give this up, you will individually get all this stuff back.
Yeah. No,
He's
that's well said.
saying that if you let it go, like your brother rejects you, you're stepping into a community of all kinds of brothers. If a
Mm-hmm.
sister rejects you, you're stepping into a community, so many sisters. If
Mm-hmm.
your mother rejects you or your father rejects you, there are mothers and fathers in this community that are going to take you in. And by the way, yes, persecutions, following Jesus into this new kingdom is not always easy,
Yeah.
but it's worth it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you lose something for entering into this community of sharing and equity, the intrinsic value of the community itself is way better than going it alone, no matter what you
Mhm.
have on your own.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's way more hope or security in facing whatever the future may bring when we face it together rather
Right.
than when we face it alone with just our hoarded resources to try to sustain us. Jesus
Right.
is saying, your fear of the future, yeah, you can try to hoard your resources and face that on your own, or let's share those resources, combine them with the community's resources, and face whatever the future has together, knowing that we've got each other's backs.
Yeah.
And then
I
that
think that's
resonates with me.
I think that's well said. That ties into where when Jesus was asked at another time where his family came out to needed to
Yeah.
speak to him, and he said, "You know who my family actually is? These people who are gathered here. These are my mother, my brothers, and my sisters. They're actually my family. This community has become who I belong to." And then I think also just to any of the great movements of justice or that have taken place in society where people didn't have enough to get their to go do mission work and get their own Airbnb and eat at a restaurant on their own, but they're going into a community and somebody puts them up at their house in on the floor in their living room and gives them a sack lunch of a PB&J and an apple, and and for them that is experiencing the generosity of the community movement that is richer and greater than what they would have experienced if they were staying in their own hotel room and eating
So,
by themselves in a restaurant. It is that experience of being blessed by the community that's working together to take care of each other while they're doing the work of, in Jesus' time, the kingdom or the beloved community or whatever you would call it.
mhm. And I'm thinking too, you were talking about where Jesus has that interaction in the stories of who is my mother, who's my brother, who's my sister, who's my family. I think of all the beautiful people I've met through Kinship over the years. Kinship is
Mm-hmm.
an organization for LGBTQ Christians, and how for them living into their authentic selves and listening to and affirming
Mm-hmm.
Jesus's voice. You know, they chose to be honest and true about who they were. And in so doing, I remember many of the young people had lost their parents because their parents belonged to a faith tradition
Mm-hmm.
that required those parents to reject their children, which I think is sick. What kind of faith tradition calls a parent to reject their child?
Yeah.
But this would happen, and yet they would come into this community and kind of be adopted
Mm-hmm.
by all the people in that community. And though it doesn't necessarily replace the ones that you loved and that you miss, sometimes we have to choose our family. Sometimes our family is who we choose for them to be, not our blood relations.
And the funny thing is that in some ways you and I, Herb, have been adopted into that community as
I know.
we've been turned away by other communities, and they've been kind enough to let a couple straight guys hang out with them too, which is
Exactly.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
I have the utmost respect and gratitude.
absolutely, and
Give me a home where when I no longer have one.
that's right, and
My
that's
my I didn't reject my faith tradition. My faith tradition rejected me,
yeah,
and kinship took me in and called me family.
yeah, and that's a little bit of the kingdom right there.
That's right.
Um,
That's what I think this passage is saying. And that all came along with persecutions, but man, look at what all you've gained.
yeah, that's right,
It's difficult, but it's worth it.
that's right, yeah. So
So in my blog this week, I mentioned the manna story, that these were the lessons that had repeatedly effort had been repeatedly made for these lessons to come across, to get
mhm.
across.
Mm-hmm.
Sharing of manna rather than hoarding it. If you hoarded it, it became
Mm-hmm.
maggot infested. The canceling of debts in Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
Um, so I do want to share this. This is from James Robinson. If anybody is unfamiliar with his work, his book, The Gospel of Jesus in Search of the Original Good News, he does a really good job in this book of delineating between the gospel that Christianity teaches about Jesus and the gospel Jesus in the stories himself actually taught, and the differences between those two. And this is just a section from, I've got the Kindle version, so it's Kindle location 58. He says, the human dilemma is, in large part, that we are each other's fate. We become the tool of evil that ruins another person as we look out for ourselves, having long abandoned any youthful idealism we once might have cherished. But if we would cease and desist from pushing the other down to keep ourselves up, then the vicious cycle would be broken. Society would become mutually supportive rather than self destructive. This is what Jesus was up to. Jesus' message was simple. He wanted to cut straight through to the point. Trust God to look out for you by providing people who will care for you, and listen to Him when He calls on you to provide for them. God is someone you can trust, so give it a try.
Hmm.
And it's not like God is someone you can trust. He'll open up the heavens and drop out a bag of carrots.
Right.
It's it's be the person that's taking care of someone else today, trusting that what you're investing in this community means that if you ever get into a hardship, if you're ever in a
Mm-hmm.
hard place, there are going to be people in that community that are going to do the same for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's a great book, The Gospel of Jesus in Search of the Original Good News by
Mm-hmm.
James Robinson.
Yeah, that's good.
That's all I got this week, Todd.
All right. Well, anything newsy on Renewed Heart Ministries that you want to share?
Just check us out on renewedheartministries.com. We continue to publish resources there every week. Follow us on your chosen social media platforms. We're on Facebook, X or Twitter, Meta's new Threads. We're on Instagram, YouTube. You- yeah, I mean, we
Are you
post
on
something on
TikTok? Are you
those.
on TikTok? TikTok.
No, sorry, I'm
TikTok.
not on TikTok.
Oh
I'm
man.
not on
Okay.
TikTok.
All right.
But yeah.
You on Truth Social?
Oh, oh, no,
Truth
no.
Social. I mean, think we'd be on the
It's in the
truth.
name.
Just. Oh, okay. All
Just
right.
the
Sorry.
name.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I had questions. I'm sorry. Continue.
Yes. Follow us on your chosen social media platform. We post something every day on those that I've mentioned. And check us out at renewedheartministries.com. Lots of resources there. And as always, I just want to take a moment to say a special thank you to all of those out there who support the work of Renewed Heart Ministries. We couldn't do what we do without you. And if any of you are listening and you would like to join them in supporting Renewed Heart Ministries work, you can do so by going to renewedheartministries.com and clicking donate. You can find my book on Amazon. I think that's it. That's it, Todd. Renewedheartministries.com. That would keep someone busy for a long time.
Okay.
That's enough.
Very good. Herb does not have an OnlyFans page.
No, I don't.
So he's never found a good photographer. So
Oh yeah, that's what it is.
that's been the issue.
I'm not photogenic.
Well, I tend to disagree with that. But anyway,
Oh my gosh, Todd, sign us off before this gets worse.
it's been great to be with you all. Again, we need thumbs up really bad. So thanks for your help. Hope you have a good week. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching, everyone.